PhonePe Digital Economy Conclave, powered by Encel, endorsed by Nepal Rashtra Bank, associated partner Rashtriya Banijay Bank Limited, supported by Nepal Telecommunication Authority, Nabil Bank, knowledge partner Society of Economic Journalists Nepal, Sejong, a brand worth event exclusively on AP1 television, simultaneously webcasted on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, November 28th, 2020. Feri pani swagat and welcome to our next session right here of PhonePe Digital Economy Conclave, powered by Encel. Hamro tesro session raheko cha digital remittance, the cost of moving money. With an average of 30% of contribution to Nepal's GDP, remittance plays a big role. How did the pandemic affect the remittance inflow? As well as we'll also talk about the journeys of the various market players on this field today. So let's get started. This is going to be our third session. I'd like to go ahead and invite on stage the moderator for this panel, Director Ununsa, eSewa Money Transfer Co, Daniel D. Shrestha. Daniel, sir. It's a pleasure to invite on stage. It's a pleasure to have him on board. Managing Director of Chaudhary Group, Nirvana Chaudhary. Co-founder of Match Technologies Inc., Krishna Joshi. CEO of IME Limited, Suman Pokhrel. And since it is a digital economy conclave, joining us all the way from Seattle, USA, over Zoom, we have with us CEO of Remitly, Matt Oppenheimer. Matt, if you could see us, if you can hear our voice, thank you very much for being here. Off to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Sanjay. Hello and namaste to all the audience present here at the PhonePe Digital Economy Conclave 2020 and to everyone watching us from AP1 television. Welcome to this panel discussion on digital remittance cost of moving money. My name is Daniel D. Shrestha and I'm honored to be moderating this panel of seasoned experts on a topic that is not only of profound interest to me personally, but also of relevance to a country like Nepal, aiming to unlock its growth potential through digital initiatives. To start off, I just would like to share a stat sourced from World Bank and a brief note that should put some context to the session we are doing today. Back in 2019, an estimated 200 million migrant workforce sent home around $700 billion to their homelands, out of which $540 billion were sent to 800 million households living in low and middle income countries. Now back to 2020, the onset of COVID-19 pandemic has taken its toll on world economies, with global remittances projected to shrink by 7.5%, and 14% by the end of 2021. Certainly not a good sign for a country like Nepal that largely depends on remittance to keep its economy moving. Now this is further underscored the importance of the global agenda to reduce the cost of moving money so it can help increase the disposable income of remittance receiving families who are most vulnerable to any economic shocks. As the pandemic has stifled the growth of overall remittance industry, it has also forced traditional business models to pivot from in-person transfers towards digital offerings, paving way for exponential growth in the uses of non-traditional means of transferring money that is low cost, safe, more transparent, and convenient. So with this juxtaposition of digital remittance as a low-cost means to send and receive money, what does the new wave of digital money transfers signal to highly cash-based but potential digital economies like Nepal? What are the challenges for the remittance industry going forward in embracing digital business models? If at all, is it sustainable? We're going to have a very interesting discourse among our panelists today in the next 60 minutes. Now to start off the discussion, just a little bit of a warm-up and introduction. I'd just like to start off by asking Mr. Matt Oppenheimer, the co-founder and CEO of Remitly, one of the leading digital remittance service providers, to just sort of hark back in time to the days when you started Remitly back in 2010. You were working with Barclays Bank and were stationed in Kenya as the head of their internet and mobile banking business. So, what was your thought process back then? What triggered you to start Remitly? And as you answer this question, I would just like to also ask, for the interest of the audience who are just trying to educate themselves in digital remittance, what does digital remittance stand for you?
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to be able to join you virtually. So as was mentioned, I started Remitly when I was living in Kenya, and I saw in Kenya how far remittances go in people's lives. As you just mentioned, 30% of GDP in Nepal comes from remittances. And I saw a lot of my Kenyan friends got remittances from their loved ones in Europe and North America, but it was expensive, it was inconvenient. And I saw how a mobile wallet in Kenya called M-Pesa was transforming domestic financial services. And it seemed like the right time to build a digital remittance service that could really improve the lives of not only the senders of remittances who make huge sacrifices, but also to bring down the cost and to make it much easier for the recipients of remittances back in folks' home countries. So fast forward to today, we now send money from 17 countries, mostly in North America and in Europe, to close to 80 receive markets, including Nepal, which is a very important market for us.
Thank you, Mr. Oppenheimer. Now, from a global entrepreneur to a Nepali entrepreneur with a global focus, Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary. I want to ask Mr. Chaudhary about your story behind CZ Finco. I'm sure, I understand that this is the business that you set up single-handedly back in 2001. And though you are at the helm of a lot of different businesses today, it's a business that is very close to your heart. So what was your thought process when you started CZ Finco, and what opportunity that you saw back then?
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here with such respected colleagues from the industry. 2001, 2002, I was 19, 20. I'd just come back to Nepal. We were at the peak of our insurgency at that time. And obviously, close to 1,500, 1,800 youth leaving the country every day. At that time, I clearly remember there was close to 88% of money that was coming in through informal channel. And we still had Western Union and a couple of other products that were available in Nepal. So when I started the business at the first time, I mean, to me, money remittance starting, capitalizing on the opportunity for money remittance was a no-brainer. You saw the amount of movement of the migrant workers happening towards Middle East, Southeast Asia, and not a single product that is competitive in terms of the pricing, as well as the structure and the the way the inbound money remittance companies were structured was not even, we were just scratching the surface. The problem at that time, what had happened was that, let me give you an example of Western Union. So Western Union had 3 agents, 12 locations, and were doing about 110 transactions a month. Now, the basic problem there was that from our policy side, for every new sub-agent or every new branch you had to open up, you had to get a central bank permission, which required a once a month board meeting that the central bank had, and a huge level of scrutiny in terms of a sub-agent happening. So I spent a lot of my time parallelly, while I was starting off with Western Union, parallelly really engaging with central bank, the policymakers, taking various other money remittance players with me, and putting together a case that would, show them the larger picture of how money remittance could transform the economy. And we landed up in a couple of months convincing the stakeholders of the central bank to give the principal agents the blanket approval for appointing sub-agents, which meant that, the scrutiny and the DD on the principal agent would happen, but then I would get the independence of opening up sub-agents. As a consequence, what really happened, say 10 years down the line, was Again, 4 agents. I'm giving a specific example of Western Union. 4 agents. Now, against 12 outlets, we have 5,000 outlets. Against 112 transactions, we're doing close to 60,000 transactions a month. So this is the kind of a shift that's happened because of a sheer change in a simple policy, right? So that's how we started Money Remittance and CG Finco. CG Finco has come a long way. Obviously, we've graduated or are in the process of graduating to a digital remittance integration into the services that we have.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Chaudhary, for your nice story on how you started CC Finco and how this stands right now. Now over to Mr. Suman Pokhrel, the CEO of IME. You are also the president of Nepal Remittance Association. You've been with the company IME for about a decade now. Tell us a little bit about the industry back then when you joined IME, or even before that, where you were in the industry. As you answer that question, I would like to ask about the cost of sending remittances to Nepal and how it changed over the years.
Thank you, Daniel. As Daniel said, I'm currently working in IME, which is a pioneer in remittance in Nepal. So I started my career with a bank, Everest Remit and Everest Bank. After that, I joined Global Bank. After working a couple of years in Global Bank, then because I was looking after remittance business in both the commercial banks, so I thought it would be a big opportunity for me to look after the remittance company rather than working as a department of as a remittance department in commercial banks. So then I joined IME at that time in 2010. So it's been a decade. But in remittance business, it's been 17 years when I was looking after remittance business. So it's very interesting. Today we are getting money in a second, right? But at that time, I used to do marketing in Dubai, and I used to visit a lot of labor camps, and not for this web-based remittance. I used to do marketing for TT, it's a telegraphy transfer. I used to come to the counter in the evening, collect all the information. I used to send a fax to the Everest Bank at that time. So that's how I started remittance. And now you can see a lot of changes in the remittance business. So you can get the remittance instantly within a second. Sender sends money now, and immediately at the counter, receiver gets the money. So this is how remittance business has transformed over the year. And again, now transformation is there. Digital remittance is coming. So a lot of things are happening globally. Neo banks are coming. It's a lot of fintechs are coming in remittance business. So lots of transformation is yet to become, in remittance business. And if you talk about cost of remittance, it used to be very, very high at the beginning. But now, though it's not not at the level where the UN and World Bank have projected, to make cost of remittance 3% by 2030. But if you see Nepal market, Nepal is one of the cheapest corridor in remittance business. Cost is around 4.62% as per World Bank, but I still think it is below than 4.62. So, but still we are in a better shape, and we are in a better position in terms of cost of remittance, though there are a lot of space and room going forward to reduce the cost. I saw one report, where this telco-based remittance, cost of telco-based remittance is already less than 3%. So since we have a huge penetration of telcos in Nepal, and going forward, I could see there could be a huge downfall in cost of remittance going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pokhrel. I would just like to move over to Mr. Krishna Joshi, who founded Mark Technologies back in 2012. With a very noble business model when everyone was going after a brick and mortar based business. What opportunity that you saw back then, Mr. Joshi, when you thought of Machnet Technologies and founded it?
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. First of all, Matt, greetings from Nepal. I don't know if you remember me. You and I were at your office when you were just getting started, and just want to let all the panelists here and the basically, audience know that basically Matt has played a pioneering role in terms of taking remittance digitally, and from the US. So hats off to you, and great to connect from Nepal, Matt. And so my journey is basically, I started one of Nepal's first e-commerce companies selling goats to migrant workers living abroad. So that's my journey, right? So then eventually what happened was people who were sending goats wanted to send money, right? And then Matt can attest to it, the regulations and the compliance and the process of being licensed and to be originate. So I've literally dedicated my life to creating a democratic platform that enables goat seller like me to be able to offer a platform that we have today. And I'm pleased to let you know that I think by end of this year, we should be live in at least 15 different countries around the world. And one of my favorite corridors that we're serving outside of Nepal is Mongolia. So it's a very interesting shift, of basically how the business has transformed from, how Nirvana's experience with Western Union, then players like Matt coming in the origination side, and then basically incumbent players like IME, how this has all evolved in such an interesting direction, right? So my take on this is basically, I think as we move forward, I think it's definitely going to be commodity market. So I think the technology is evolving so fast and the business is actually evolving so fast. I think that basically, the whole journey here, right? So we have 4 or 5 people here, but with this completely different journey, completely different timeline of the business that we've been around. So for me, the whole journey was more than just being purely in the remittance, was how do we create a democratic platform now, which has turned into an API that enables origination and settlement at the real time.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Balkrishna Joshi, for also your thoughts on how you founded Machnet and what the opportunity that you saw. Now, just to segue into the next segment in this conversation that we're having, Matt joining us from the US virtually. Matt, World Bank had earlier projected a decline of 20% in the global remittance in 2020. When we had the onset of COVID pandemic back in Feb. But as the figures read recently, it read for very pleasant readings in the Q3. And projection has been revised to 7.5% only. What do you think has been the reason behind this uptick? To what extent can the uptick of digital remittance service be attributed to this cushioning of the fall maybe?
Yeah, great question, Daniel. It was concerning at the beginning of the year on some of the World Bank projections of remittances dropping up to 20%. And it's dropped a lot less, as you said. And I really credit that to the importance of remittances. I mean, I talked about why I started the business, seeing how far remittances went in my friends' lives in Kenya. And so many people watching this know much better than I do how far remittances go. I think that during what is obviously a global pandemic, those funds go even further. And so what we've seen from our customers is that our customers have really worked hard to continue to support their families when the money goes a very long way towards medical expenses, basic living expenses, et cetera. And it's quite frankly incredibly inspiring to myself and to the team to serve customers during this time. I think the other thing on the digital point that you said that is interesting is, there was this gradual shift happening to digital remittance providers like Remitly. And, what happened during COVID is that shift accelerated. So we saw our new customer growth triple in May of 2019 to May 2020, right after COVID started to unfold. And I think more and more customers were looking for digital alternatives to be able to send money home. So we've been really pleased that we've been able to support customers during this time. And what we've seen is that once customers use us that first time, trust us, and trust a digital remittance provider for the first time, they tend to stay with us for a very long time. So again, just a real honor to serve customers during this time, given the commitment they have to their families back home right now.
Follow-on question to the answer that you've just given. So pandemic seems to have been a great catalyst to the the growth of digital remittances, as you also said. As you said, like you have seen a triple-digit growth in your customer additions. I just wanted to know the demographic profile of these new customers that have been added to your platform. Does this addition really constitute the blue-collared migrant workers who for 10 years have been used to sending $500 a month from a local store who knew them by their name? So just your thoughts on that, Mr. Oppenheimer.
Yeah. The profile of customers has remained pretty similar to customers that we saw, pre-2020. It's just the number of new customers have shifted more digitally. And I think that if you put yourself into the shoes of our customers, using a digital service to send remittances. And we'll talk about digital remittances later, I'm sure. But for us, that means originating a remittance via digital device, usually via our mobile app. But then the recipient has a wide range of bank deposit, mobile wallets, cash pickup, et cetera. It really depends on the country, but we have a wide range of all three of those options in Nepal. And oftentimes people really didn't know or understand or trust, most importantly, a nameless, faceless digital provider. And still that trust needs to be built. But with the pandemic, I think people have looked to digital alternatives just because going to a physical location either was closed for a period of time or they didn't feel as comfortable. And so the trust and the kind of, just shift in sending pattern, I think happened and continues to happen during, the global pandemic. And thankfully, we've had the infrastructure, the team, the security, the platform to be able to serve customers during that time.
Thanks, Mr. Oppenheimer. I think that sort of gives us the signal of the usage of the increase in the usage of digital remittance post this pandemic. Now, over to Mr. Suman Pokhrel. Well, not bad readings either in case of Nepal as well. Positive growth in the last 2 months of the fiscal year in the inward remittance. What's your assessment on this? Has this crisis sort of further necessitated the need to go digital for the remittance companies in Nepal as well?
Actually, after this, immediately after this outburst of COVID, at that time everybody were very panicked, and at that time we thought remittance would go down and a lot of people will be coming back to the country. And so in a couple of months we had the same kind of thought remittance will go down definitely. But when we saw in April, after April, May and June, the numbers were very, very high. And in August, I guess, it was a record high remittance in Nepal, more than 100 billion rupees. So that's amazing experience, in remittance, though we had that kind of crisis, COVID crisis. So what I think is remittance was not growing at that pace since last couple of years. The growth was not that big compared to a couple of years back. And it was a stagnant kind of growth. But there are a few factors that we need to look into. One factor is since our border was sealed and there was no people movement from outside the country, so we used to have a lot of under invoicing, and the informal money used for the settlement of that informal sectors. So since we did not have that much of this trade, so that money was coming through formal channel, one factor. Other factor is gold was not coming to the country in person. So that is another factor. And another factor is people used to bring a lot of stuff like TV and other stuff when they were coming back to the country. And since people were not coming back, and instead they are sending those savings through formal sector only. And informal sector were very, very inactive at that time. People who were involved in informal sector, they were not able to go to the camps and collect money. So people, they had no choice and they send money through formal channel only. That's how remittance has increased in Nepal since a couple of months. And this is not the case of Nepal only. If you see the South Asian region, India also saw downfall in remittance because they had more than 90% formal remittance. But if you see the case of Pakistan and Bangladesh and Nepal, where informal sector were very strong. And interestingly, at this time, in this COVID crisis, remittance in all three countries have increased. So it shows it's because of informal sectors, downfall in informal sector that has contributed to the increase in remittance in Nepal.
And just to follow on that, we have seen the development of digital payments ecosystem in Nepal. I just want to connect, has the digital payments ecosystem, developed over the last half a decade or so, been of any help to sort of, channelize the remittance that was hard to come by, and there are some difficulties in the receive side in the market. Can you connect some dots on that?
Yeah, actually, yes, this COVID has opened a lot of opportunity for digital remittance, and everybody is very much excited. And good thing is even central bank people, they are very interested to have a better understanding of digital remittance. I had a lot of meetings with officials in central bank. They were asking a lot of questions about digital remittance and business modality, how it works. So it's a very good sign. Though we could not see much digital transactions, digital remittance transactions in this period, but as I said, it has opened an eye of all the stakeholders. So I could see a lot of opportunities going forward. Still, there are a lot of issues. It's not that easy. As Nirvana said, when we started Remittance, it was not easy. It's all about the trust that you need to build, right? So it takes time. It's not going to happen immediately. So it will take some time, and a couple of years definitely. We could see a lot of digital remittance coming into the country, and I'm pretty much sure. And there are other problems, like very well, most of the remittance coming into the wallet are being cashed out at the agent location at a very high cost. So we are talking about reducing the cost, and yes, digital remittance is reducing the cost at sending side. But when people go to cash out their money, and again they are paying hefty money, right? Hefty charges. So again, it's increasing the cost of remittance altogether. So there are a lot of issues that we need to address. Stakeholders, we need to sit together. Remittance companies, fintech companies, right, and central bank. We have to sit together and we have to discuss. We have to finalize, find out the solution. And so, and then only I think we'll have a better digital remittance business going forward. But I'm very much confident it's going to happen very soon.
I think that's a very good insight from Mr. Pokhrel. The development of digital remittance is promising. At the same time, there is a bit of challenge going forward. Mr. Joshi, I want to ask a question to you. Just the post-introduction of the legal frameworks for digital payments in Nepal in 2016, we've seen in the rise of mobile wallets and mobile banking users, and which seems to be very ideal for the development of the pipeline in the receive side for originating companies. But as Suman, Mr. Pokhrel also mentioned, the ratio of the digital transactions is like a little less, about 20% or so. What's your thoughts on this? Like, how important do you think it is to digitize the last mile compared to the first mile, in the markets like ours?
So I think a great question, Daniel. So I think the way I look at it is I'm in a very unique position where I understand the origination side, primarily in the US, and also the basically receiving side in the in Nepal, right? So in fact, I think one of the interesting, basically post-pandemic. So post-pandemic, one of the interesting, I'd say, evolution of the business model is the way we see it is the customer acquisition. Could that be done not only on the origination side, but also on the receiving side? So when I think basically the customer acquisition funnel, which is about to get inverted, that's exactly what we're seeing, right? So when the customers that are already with like you guys, the wallet providers or the financial institutions or the remittance companies, right? So when basically that happens, could that accelerate, digital transformation, especially digitalization of the remittance? So the way I see it, I think, basically somebody like Remitly has done an amazing job. In fact, they were one of the pioneers in terms of, kind of giving a whole digital touch, especially from US-based, TransferWise and all that. They are all European-based. But in the US, Matt played a significant role in helping that digitize, especially on the origination side, right? So for me now, actually, the whole challenge is how can the customer acquisition done through the beneficiary side, right? I think the role that the digital wallets, the financial institutions, and the remittance companies will play, that will actually reduce the significant portion of the transaction being originated. That is the customer acquisition cost, and I think that will probably more accelerate the way the digital remittance is going to move forward. Then that attached with the financial services. Right, in Nepal, so we're actually, helping folks in the US open FD accounts. The return obviously here is 8 to 10%, right? So basically that being attached to that remittance is now taking this to a whole different level where we're not only talking about the digitalization of remittance, but we're talking about productizing of remittance. So that's when the value is increased, right? That's when right now, the margins that we have just basically disbursement is very insignificant compared to the whole, let's just say in US, we're already moving in less than 3%. That's our cost, right? But the thing is now, for that cost to come down to almost what I'd say was zero, is like people like you connecting with people like Remitly, and then not only digitalizing, but productizing of remittance. And that's exactly what I say. And I loved what Suman ji was talking about. Suddenly people are not carrying TV to Nepal. So what they're doing is they're basically sending money, maybe going to his store and picking up TV, right? So how do you now connect this? And I think that's I think this is exactly where it's all going. That's how I see it.
Very, very good insights, Mr. Joshi. Definitely, it sort of speaks of the future that we're looking ahead, in terms of, how we can see the cost of remittances being reduced with a very new business models that we can adopt in markets like Nepal. Now over to Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary. Mr. Chaudhary, your company, CZ Finco, is the principal agent of Western Union. And now with the new thoughts on fintech, with the new digital remittance service providers coming at the backyards of big, legacy businesses like Western Union in the market, and these companies coming globally as well as in Nepal with a better pricing, coupled with more convenient models, more transparency in pricing. How do you see the dynamics in the industry changing in the immediate future between the legacy players versus the new fintech-based players? How do you think we can keep pace with the digitalization in the future?
See, I think one of the fundamental problems in Nepal is that our cost of data and our smartphone penetration cost of data is one of the highest in South Asia, and the smartphone penetration is one of the lowest, right? And I think this shift is happening very, very slowly. Obviously, when you have a duopoly market with only 2 telecom players, you're not going to get this type of paradigm shift. You look at a case like India, when a telecom player like Jio came in, it just transformed the entire data play in India. So first challenge and a big bottleneck for us is this, right? Secondly, I think what companies like Remitly or TransferWise or other companies are doing are great, but majority of our remittance coming into Nepal, inward into Nepal, I would assume 80% plus would be from the migrant workers, and for them to understand and to be able to, what is the competitive advantage for them to be using a digital product? It has to be pricing, for them. Let's say average money, they're sending $500. They are just going to calculate what is going to cost me by the time my recipient, my person I'm sending it to, he'll be getting in his hand. Today, all the remittance players, not digital, the actual brick and mortar remittance players, they're not making any commission at all. The commission structure is so competitive that basically the companies are playing on the float and trying to make money on the float that remains, in terms of the foreign currency coming in. So while the digital remittance, I feel, is still going to take at least minimum 5 years for us, for markets like Nepal to completely adapt and adopt in terms of the receiving side as well. But I think my personal views is that from CG Finco, right, from our companies, CG Finco providing Western Union was just one product. We already started off with 3-4 products back in the days, and we've been growing pretty okay in that way. But already in the last 1.5 years, we've already started to migrate and put that in our own platform for the digital remittance. Now, one of the fundamental challenges we've seen there is that, let's take the example of someone sending money from a labor camp in UAE. Now, there's so much of competition in terms of the various local players that exist in the UAE, who have, like, in one labor camp where you'll have people from South Asian countries, there'll be at least 10 different outlets back to back. So unless we are able to, like we did 15 years ago, from banks, from remittance companies, have our guys sit in those remittance outlets and then gradually educate the people on the ground, saying, okay, you know what, you don't really need to come all this way to this store. here is how you download the app, and you tie up with the telco company for giving them data incentive. This is how you download the app, and then this is how you are connected to a bank account, your bank account locally, and how this is how you can send money. So that level of education, I think, will still take a couple of years, and for that to be adopted and brick and mortar to really close down it's a very long way to go for us. I think minimum 5 years. While this shift is going to happen, it's going to take a while. The basic fundamental of having access to cheaper data, the smartphone penetration is very, very important, because the the physical infrastructure for the retail exists, the customers exist, the sending market exists. It's just basically you're trying to digitize that part, right? I think what will really happen is that unless you need to be in 5 of these things in an ecosystem. Unless you're a telco-driven product or a big financial services-driven product, I'm talking about mobile wallet, or a big e-commerce-driven product, like let's say Alibaba, Daraz, or someone, or you are a big, already an existing remittance product, or you are producing your own handphones, like Apple Pay or Samsung Pay. I think you're going to have a very difficult time within the next 5 years when like first movers like Remitly, etc. have come in. But tomorrow you're already seeing things like Google Pay and WhatsApp Pay and Facebook Pay, and you have local products as well. So we have a very short window to sort of partner with the international players, short window to sort of convert the people really at the grassroots level to get educated on the digital side and get them the smartphone penetration. A very small window as to crank up our other digital e-commerce platforms, and the reason being that the critical mass is not there. So people like, let's say, Amazon or the big guys who are already involved in other countries in South Asia, why haven't they come into Nepal? Because the critical mass isn't there. Critical mass will again come in when the data infrastructure exists. Today, the number of people who are unbanked in Nepal are, I think, about 60%. But out of the 60%, 80% have smartphones. So that's the advantage. If you are able to capitalize that, even if you don't have bank accounts, you have a smartphone, and this is the ABC reason why you should migrate to digital banking, and which I'm taking remittance also part of it. That's going to be the smart move. But it's a process. I mean, inevitably, this is going to be the shift. But there are a lot of challenges, bottlenecks, and fundamentals that we need to sort out.
Okay, Mr. Nirvana, we saw that a little bit of a cautious sort of optimism there from your side on how this digital remittance services or digital offerings will go and sort of add value in the industry. So I think it's a very interesting discussion that we're having with. Yeah.
So sorry, I was not just to correct myself. I was not putting a caution on the business side of it. It's a no-brainer. Bal and even Matt, they've been in this business for long. I mean, they've seen it in market like Kenya with M-Pesa, guys like M-Pesa. I mean, how many M-Pesas can you think of globally, right? Getting this in the context of Nepal, digital remittance, I'm not talking about wallets. I'm talking about digital remittance. It's a no-brainer. There should be companies doing it more and more. I was talking from a perspective of a consumer really using the digital remittance and leaving behind the brick and mortar. That will take 5 years. But obviously, entrepreneurs and companies and new technologies and products need to start getting into the market now. So absolutely, there is opportunity, but I was talking about the challenges. But that obviously, unless you have challenges and bottlenecks, those opportunities are not that exciting. So.
Yeah, catching on the phrase from Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary, I'd just like to ask the question to Matt. The global average cost of sending remittance is now a little less than 6-7%. And United Nations Sustainable Development Goal has it that it has to be, we should aim to decrease that cost of remittance to 3% or less by 2030. And catching on the phrase from Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary, that there is a bit of, challenge on the customer pool side of, availing these digital remittance services at the moment and also in the future. So, what do you think, Mr. Oppenheimer, is the reason why we have not been able to reduce the cost of remittance, even though there's been a lot of development in digital side of things? Is that the customer pool side, that is one of the biggest hurdles?
Yeah, it's a good question, Daniel. I think that the good news with remittances is they have increasingly started to come down as more digital players have entered the space. As you mentioned earlier, in Nepal, potentially only 20% of people are using digital remittance services. But when customers do, at least with our service, you take the cost out of going to a physical agent to send money by linking it to a digital account. It obviously brings down the cost. On the receive side, as Bal was talking about earlier, that is not digitized yet, but the more it becomes digitized, you can also take more money out of the system because it's digital on both ends. And I think that over time, both will become digital, with the send side happening faster than the receive side. And as that happens, I think cost will continue to come down. But I think that digitizing it inherently takes out costs in the system, and therefore, means savings for customers. The other element with pricing that I think is really important, that the World Bank and others talk about, is the more friendly that regulators are to digital remittance players and to new entrants, the more it will cause new entrants to come into the market and more competition, which will drive down price. And I think that's ultimately a really good thing for customers. And having gone through that process myself in markets like the US, where you have to get a license in every single state, it's a tough process. And so I think that by having friendly regulators to new businesses to create more competition, will also bring down price over time, and is a really important part of the equation.
Thank you, Mr. Oppenheimer. Just another question on the challenges of digital remittance service providers going forward. And there is this question of sustainability. This question goes out to Mr. Balkrishna Joshi. You're involved in the original side of things and offering turnkey digital payment solutions to the businesses around. Now, given the cost of onboarding customers, just now Mr. Oppenheimer also had to say, there's the cost of compliance and, obviously the operation cost, coupled with the downward trend pricing also. Add to that, there's still the challenges around the de-risking practices of global financial institutions granting access to remittance companies as a whole. How do you think, a novel, truly digital companies like yours can scale up? And how do you address the question of sustainability with all the challenges that we've just discussed about?
Thank you, Daniel. Good question. So I think, especially when I started this business, I thought people literally thought I was crazy. Oh, a small guy like me is going to compete head on head with Remitly. So on the fact side, right? So basically we bring over 15% of money that comes from US to Nepal. And on top of that, so if you go through World Bank's website, so we are the least expensive remittance service provider from US to Nepal. So these are the two numbers that I can back you up with, right? Now I think the question of sustainability, question of customer acquisition cost. I certainly understand, and I completely agree with Matt in terms of having to deal with the regulators in every friendly state, and so I understand all of that. So, but the very interesting fact about how the world is evolving, right? So in my course of being in this business, I started from printing, meager checks, right, to accepting ACH payments, to now basically, moving money real time through card payments, right? So I've gone through this evolution, right? But one of the most interesting evolution of this entire business is the business model, the way I see it, right? So what we're living in a post-Uberized economy. So if you were to analyze my business model, so I don't really control the entire ecosystem. So it's kind of Uberized. So these are multiple, stakeholders who are regulated, right, with multiple skill sets which are important to originate and to disperse these transactions. So the way I see it, it's like, so finally the closed network business that was established by Western Union in 1871, right? Now this whole closed network model is now being a modular, right? So basically now let's just talk about KYC, right? So in our system, so what happens is the license provider in the US is obviously doing the KYC, right, of the sender. But at the same time, the beneficiary, the party who's supposed to clear out the payment, is also parallelly doing the KYC and then connecting it between, reducing the cost. So in our model, so what we're saying is the burden, all right? So right now, the originator has a burden to make sure that even the disbursement payments are being dispersed, I mean, like it was basically like making sure that all the KYC information, everything matches. But what we're saying is each and every component of through origination, through customer acquisition to settlement is now becoming modular. Like for example, in my case, right? So in my case, I had a lot of customers in the US that was sending goats to Nepal doing the same. But obviously I didn't have the licensing infrastructure to be able to provide the remittance service. So what we did was I had the customer, somebody had the, like basic the licensing, somebody was making the disbursement. So what we're seeing now, especially right after the basically COVID, is the modularization of the entire, basically the whole cross-border remittance turning into remittance payments. So, and I think we will continue to see this modularization happen. Like for example, like payment processing, all of us are probably familiar with Plaid. So out of nowhere, Plaid comes and suddenly is an expert in, linking banks, doing the, like basically doing more of a checks on who the senders are. So the Plaid's basically focus is only to do that, right? So we're seeing this modularization, and then, I don't know what Matt thinks, but I think that's exactly, so basically where the industry is going. So suddenly this whole closed network is now being broken into a smaller pieces. Hence, the cost is shared, and hence, basically the customers, one of the reasons, like in our case, like, which I think, I think you or Nirvana said earlier, is who's our customer base. So customer base, I'm sure it's the same thing for Remitly, same thing for the companies that we support. These are not necessarily the people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars working at a computer desk job. These are primarily people who's gone there in DV lottery visa, and who are absolutely well informed in terms of basically, the service that they are getting from the service providers.
I could see Matt smiling on that answer being given, Mr. Joshi. Any of your thoughts on the sustainability question that I asked to Mr. Joshi, Matt?
Yeah, I think that, the sustainability for me comes down to the fact that, well, customers care a lot about price, and we offer a very fair and transparent and low price. Ultimately, what customers care about is, do I understand how the service works, especially for folks who have never used a digital provider? And then even more than that, do I trust the service to be able to get money home? And I think that trust element can't be understated. And with that, I think that, if a customer saves a dollar or two, but fears their identity getting stolen or fears their money getting lost, it pales in comparison. So I tend to think that prices will continue to come down, as Val mentioned, because of the fact that in that modularized system, if payment systems get faster, like, this is too detailed in terms of payments, but the Durbin Amendment being passed in the US enabled us with instant card processing to be much cheaper for remittance companies, and that in turn passed along savings to customers. The more that payment systems domestically speed up, the more that regulators encourage innovation, the more that parts of that modular system increase, I think the more savings there'll be for customers. But ultimately, I think customers will look to the trusted provider that they know will be able to get their money home and will keep their personal information safe.
I think you raised a very interesting and insightful point on the need of trust needs to be garnered from the customers, and the need of perpetual innovation that the remittance companies need to come about in the market. Now, before we head on to the Q&A, some questions from the audience, I would just like to have a quick remark from Mr. Suman Pokhrel, catching on to the answer that you gave to my last question on the development of the financial ecosystem to make sure that the cost saving that we have, would otherwise get from offering digital remittance services by making sure the funds being received at the receive side remains at the digital financial ecosystem itself, by the development of the wallet and digital payment ecosystem. I just want to, kind of tease out a little bit on the remark that you made earlier. So from the provider perspective, since you have a remittance wing which is leading in the market, as well as you are in the forefront of the DFS business also, what do you think can be done on or the models that can be adopted at the receive side, along with the regulatory environment that we need to have to make sure that we ensure the uptake of these alternative mechanisms to send and receive money? And being a receive market also, we can contribute towards the reduction of the cost of sending remittance. So your thoughts on that?
Okay, Daniel. So first, regarding the sustainability, I just want to add a few points on that. In Nepal market, you can see we have more than 50 remittance companies, and with 27 commercial banks all working in remittance business, right? And new PSPs, payment service providers, we already have more than 10 or 12 payment service provider in Nepal. So market is very, very competitive. And if you see the market, especially this legacy or traditional remittance, brick and mortar remittance business model, so margin is getting thinner and thinner every day, and there is no service charge, and there is a lot of unhealthy competition in the both the side, the sending side and receiving side. So it's going to be very, very difficult for the companies, new companies, to sustain their business model. And if we want digital remittance to thrive and survive going forward, so we have to think from this side also, how we can build the sustainable business model, in particular in digital remittance. That is very, very important. And regarding this cost, so in this legacy or traditional remittance business, so cost, there are few, if you break down the cost, one is sending charges, another is FX margin that sending side is keeping and receiving side is keeping. Another is an indirect cost, for the customers to reach to the counter, to travel for a whole day and reach to the counter and get the money and go back and keep in the house, and next day go to the money lenders or banks to deposit that money. So there is a lot of cost, behind. So cost of remittance is very, very high in this legacy business. And good thing is digital remittance has reduced that part, that behind the cost has been totally reduced because money is directly coming to the wallet. So that's a good part. And that is not enough, as we are discussing, it will take some time to for the customers to adapt or adopt this service going forward. So we need to have a backward integrations. And as Balda said, we need to productize this business model. And on other side, we have to have better infrastructures. As Nirvana says, its data is very, very important, and 4G networks is not that good in Nepal still. And we are talking about digital remittance and also digital product across the country, and it's not possible, given the infrastructure that we have. And coming to the regulatory side, regulators are just started to think about this digital business, digital remittance, e-commerce, and this thing, right? And it'll take some time for them to understand this business, and they are very scared, about the data protections, about the compliance, this AML and CFTs. So they are very much concerned, and it's obvious, because they are regulators, they have to think from that perspective, and to have a change in that perspective, in terms of data security and other measures. So it'll take some time, but good thing is they are positive, they are very much open, they are ready to discuss. So yes, there are a lot of regulatory interventions are required in terms of KYC and all. So going forward, I hope it will happen. But everything is very much positive, and fundamentals are it's improving. So yes, so that's it.
Now we move on to the questions from the audience. Thank you, Raksha. This is the question that has come for Matt. So to Matt, what is the cost of customer acquisition at the sender side? And does that justify lifetime values if we aim to bring cost of remittance down? This is directed to Matt.
Yeah, good question. I spend a lot of my day and time thinking about how to build a sustainable business, thinking about the lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. And the way I view it is, it's very sustainable because the lifetime value of our customers are multiples higher than our customer acquisition cost. And I view that as investing in the relationship with our customers when we pay that customer acquisition cost. And that includes a lot of things we do, like promotions to our customers, FX promotions that I know that others offer as well, that go directly into our customers' pockets, as well as, traditional advertising on digital channels and offline channels as well. So, it's one of the reasons we've been able to raise close to 400 million in equity is when you really look under the hood. While we don't share publicly a lot of our unit economics, meaning customer acquisition cost and lifetime value numbers, they're very sustainable and represent, the long-term relationship we have with our customers, and how when we deliver on a great product and a great promise, our customers come back to us again and again.
All right. It says we did a poll on social media asking people if they know that they can send remittances more money digitally. So 53.8% responded that they didn't know. So why is digital remittance not promoted that much? Or has it not reached the intended audience?
My assumption looking at the data, I think it's probably most on the receiver side. I think on the receiver side, actually people don't really care if from what I experience, 100% of our transactions are all settled digitally. And then in the recipient side, so I think the whole mentality is basically like, which IME has perfected, which Western Union has perfected, just basically receiving remittances. But in our side, I concur with Matt, so post-pandemic, our customer acquisition has gone up by 300%. Right? So I think here especially, I think one of the reasons is people are on the receiving side are still not aware. They're still not aware of that basic, it is being sent, it is being sent digitally. And usually, whenever they're receiving remittances, their whole question is, where do I come and pick it up? So you have to make some convincing to make sure that it's actually going to get credited to your bank. So my assumption is, I think, after post-pandemic, as people, people who are sending and receiving money now is finally understanding the value that is being delivered, through digital transformation, through a digital, basically medium, and then I think the adoption will scale. But right now, people are still, I completely agree again with Nirvana when we said about especially the brick and mortars dominating this space primarily. Has to do with a lot, especially in the origination side, has to do with the KYC, people who are probably working under the, some kind of a radar, not wanting to, not wanting to, openly share the documents, so on the origination side, that's one of the primary reasons. But as the fintech companies are figuring out alternative algorithms, right? Not necessarily only the social security numbers or the government issued IDs under certain threshold. I think more and more people will come. But again, saying that, which Matt said earlier about the regulator's intention to it. Now, Matt, I'm sure you're familiar that now the travel rule might be applied to transactions that are over $250. So how's that going to change, right? So what does travel rule means? I will collect as much as information from you, your ID, your work authorization, blah, blah, blah. So it's very interesting. So I think the awareness is there and the cost has significantly come down. Now, if you look at Western Union's pricing, the pricing for the cash origination and the digital origination is completely different. It's completely different. So it's significantly different. So why do I want to use digital, right? So even if you look at Western Union's, value proposition, their own rate, actually, they have a dynamic pricing where the rates actually changes what origination method that you are using. Is it cash? Is it card? Is it, ACH? Or what method that you are paying out? So we're seeing this, right? So digital now is finally has come in to reduce the cost, increase the awareness. It's like basically, I remember, I remember being in Portland, Oregon, and then, used to go to Fry's to find, cameras or laptops or also that, right? But what did we end up doing? So we used to go there, take a picture of the laptop or the camera and send it to Amazon and say, hey, can you beat this? So I think we're beginning to see that in the remittance. So I think this adoption of people engaging in this remittance will probably increase, but I'm not surprised. My assumption is, especially in people in Nepal, they are still unaware of digital remittance because in some ways they don't really care to either if it's being originated through cash or if it's being originated through a Remitly platform or our platform or Western Union's platform.
Thanks, Mr. Joshi. Your final thoughts, maybe, Mr. Chaudhary, on the awareness side of things for the digital remittance offerings on the send side as well as the receive side?
So the transformation or the shift towards digital play is inevitable. Okay, it is going to happen whether you talk about digital banking or digital remittance, because over the period of time, the cost is going to be so low that the brick and mortar will not be able to compete with it. Whether it's remittance or it's even banking, right? I think banks over the next 5 years plus will also just be cash disseminating services. All different services will be provided through your digital fintech platforms, which many players are coming in, whether it's microfinance or insurance or even remittance. Today, I think talking about your question of the 53% knowing about it, I don't think those are the people today. I'm generalizing it. I don't think those are the people who really fuel the remittance volume and money that is flowing in. The people who are really sending the money are people who are not really not such ardent respondents to Facebook or social media, polls and all of that. But however, that is changing. I was in the Middle East last week, and I was going to one of the retail outlets, and they were literally using their own platform and telling them that, why don't you send this money? And the guy kept on asking that who's going to be giving my money back home. So I think the level of trust plays a very important factor in remittance. The level of convenience comes in much, much less. Level of trust is number one. Level of cost, the price you're paying. Predominantly, at least in our culture, we don't mind. A person in a labor camp doesn't mind walking that extra 10 minutes if he's getting 10 pence lower sending from a retail outlet vis-a-vis his digital. But again, over a period of time, it's inevitable that the digital play will come into force. And it's good that many people today are working on various different avenues and aspects of that ecosystem and are contributing to making the sending side and the receiving side much more productive, efficient, as well as cost-wise very, very less.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think we have a very interesting and excellent discussion on this topic today. And the takeaways for me is everybody is in unison or in consensus of the fact that the digital remittance surge uptake is inevitable. The key is to make sure that how the providers are able to gain trust from the customers. And also for the developing economies like Nepal, we also need to take cognizance of the fundamentals, the infrastructures that we need to build, we need to develop for these digital remittance services to grow. And at the same time, we also need to have a very enabling environment from the regulator side. I think that's the key takeaways that I take from this session. And also Mr. Joshi and Matt, Mr. Oppenheimer, they being like fintech-based players, were a little more maybe enthusiastic over the time it might take for the transition from this traditional remittance service to digital remittance service completely. So I think it was very, very insightful discussion. I enjoyed learning a lot of good things and insights from all of you, and I would like to thank each and every one of you for making the time to join this event, and a special thanks to Mr. Oppenheimer. Like, I know this is a very late hour in US at the moment, so I'm very, very thankful for your time, Mr. Oppenheimer. Thanks a lot to everyone.
PhonePe Digital Economy Conclave, powered by Encel, endorsed by Nepal Rashtra Bank, associated partner Rashtriya Banijya Bank Limited, supported by Nepal Telecommunication Authority, Nabil Bank, knowledge partner Society of Economic Journalists Nepal, Sejong, a brand worth event exclusively on AP1 television, simultaneously webcasted on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, November 28th, 2020.